Hi everyone, welcome to the week 1 lecture video. So for this week, we have two major things we need to do. First and foremost is we need to go over the course outline or the course syllabus. And secondly, I need to introduce to you our first real topic of the course, which is what is anthropology? Basically, what have you gotten yourself into? I'm not going to spend too much time going over the syllabus itself. I mean, there's lots of opportunities for me to do that here, but I've provided you with quite a bit of information in the PowerPoint that explains the different components of the syllabus. And indeed, actually, if we pop out here, you will see that the best way to view the PowerPoint for this class is like this, where you can see both the slide and the notes that are found at the bottom. So in some cases, you might have to pick that up and move that around. If you go to view at the top of PowerPoint, you'll see that there is this notes page thing. And if you click on that, it'll also give you an opportunity to see the PowerPoint as well as my notes below. And my notes below, again, are these explanatory notes. They're a little more details. They're basically what I would provide you in a formal lecture context. Okay, so let's go back into presenter view. So because I'll just also mention this is a first year course, I'm assuming that the majority of you have not taken a course before. This might be your first class ever. So I've provided a lot of context in those notes, or lots of explanations in those notes as to what is in the syllabus and why. And here's a link to a funny little video if you don't want to take my word for why the syllabus is so important. Okay. So again, I'm just going to briefly go over these. The syllabus, of course, includes things like the course content and objectives, which tells you a little bit about what this course is about and the various topics we're going to be covering. The learning outcomes, or the course objectives, what these tell you is what our high-level goals are for this course. These have been developed by myself and my anthropology colleagues. And so at the end of the day, this is how I will be designing your midterm exam, your final exam, and your written assignments around your ability to show me that you've learned these really important concepts and that you can indeed do them, right? So you can demonstrate an understanding of the concepts of gender and age from an anthropological perspective. Okay. So course content, hopefully you've worked through or are seeing Blackboard right now and you're seeing all the different ways that course content is being delivered to you. In terms of grade determination, you'll see it's fairly straightforward. You have your syllabus quiz that's due in 2 weeks. The reason why it's due on the 18th and not at the end of the first week is because the 18th is your add drop deadline. So up until the 18th, students could be coming and going from this class, and I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to write the syllabus quiz and get their 2%. The course wiki we'll talk about this week in Blackboard Collaborate. I'll show you how to edit it, how to add new content, and how I'm going to be assessing you on that. You'll have 2 midterm exams for which I will provide study guides, usually in the week before. I'll post the study guide, but if I can get it out sooner, I will. And then you'll have a film review assignment towards the end of the term that will synthesize and bring together a bunch of the content we've talked about. And then finally, we have the final exam. I do accept late assignments. They have a penalty of minus 10% per day that they're late unless you talk to me. I cannot stress how important it is that you communicate with me throughout the course. If you need something like an extension, please contact me as soon as possible and we can make arrangements for that. Online class activities has already been mentioned to you in the email that I sent out. Again, that's in the syllabus that we will be having weekly Blackboard Collaborate sessions. I'd ask that when you join us that you begin with your mic muted, but no, you do not ever have to turn your video on, so I don't force you to do that. Should you miss a Blackboard Collaborate session, because attendance is not mandatory, it's not required, I will record them and post them on Blackboard so that you can see what we were able to talk about. In terms of your ability to record, yes, you can record class content. However, you are not allowed to distribute or to sell it without my permission. Okay, so if you have any questions about this, just ask. Contacting me. Use your MuCune account. The reason why I ask you to use Anthropology 110 or Anth 110 in the subject line is to allow me to triage my email. I have 4 courses this term, which means I need to know and kind of prioritize which emails need to be addressed first. So if you have Anth 110 in the subject line, and I know you have a midterm exam the next day, chances are that's a pretty important email. If you don't put Anth 110 in the subject line, I may not get to it as rapidly unless there's something else about the subject line that really catches my attention. I'll respond within 24 hours, except for during the evenings. I usually take a bit of a break, trying to get that work-life balance. I'll send out announcements through Blackboard. Office hours, I've posted a link to something called Sign Up Genius. And in Sign Up Genius, you can go in and sign up for a 15-minute block of time with me during office hours. The reason why I'm doing that is just to ensure that everyone has time. But of course, if you need more time than 15 minutes, or if you're unable to get a slot, or if that time doesn't work for you, please send me an email and we'll arrange for a time that we can meet or have a phone conversation or whatever. And then finally, social media. I do like to use it. I've been using it for this course under the Anth110 hashtag for several years. So even without an account, you can search for this hashtag at Twitter and at Instagram, and you'll see content that I've posted, communications I've had with students, all of which are relevant to this course. Okay. The last thing I want to emphasize from the syllabus perspective is responsibilities, and this is really important that you're aware of what your responsibilities are, right? And this is everything from being registered in the class, knowing when the add and drop deadline is, when the withdraw deadline, but also around academic integrity. So under here, I've posted a little bit of information about the 3 R's of academic integrity: responsibilities, rights, and resources, and give you some examples of what those look like in play. And just note that academic integrity applies not just to you, but also to me, right? I have responsibilities, rights, and actually a lot of my responsibilities are around providing you with necessary resources. Okay. We're also going to be having some in-class discussions, and I'm hoping, because we'll be talking about some topics that may make people uncomfortable, that we can create or foster an environment in which everyone feels safe and comfortable to express their thoughts. And so that's what these discussions guidelines outline. Note that these are not written in stone. These are meant to be a living document that we can change and adapt throughout the course of the term. So I look forward to hearing your feedback on it, and we'll talk more about these in our Collaborate session. Okay. I did post this weekly workflow. Just let me move myself out of the way. Whoop. That's the sound I make when I move myself out of the way. And I've done this for all my courses, and this is just kind of a recommendation of how you can approach this class, because for some of you, online learning may be new. For some of you, university education may be new. So here's some tips. So to read, to watch, to read some more, to write, to review, and to complete. Okay. Couple pages with the schedule. This is just a graphical representation of what you see in the syllabus. Textbook should be hopefully a couple of used copies floating around. We've been using it for several years now. I'll also post additional readings as PDFs. I've posted an introductory video to myself. Oh, this is weird having me float over myself here. I'll put myself over here. Oh, that's so much better. Put myself over Pride Rock over here. That's not Pride Rock. That's one of the archaeological sites I work on. Anyways, it's not required for you to look at, but just if you're a little bit curious about where I come from and who I am, that's what this photo kind of captures, is some of my experiences in my journey in anthropology over the last 20 years. What questions do you have for me? This is really important, and this is where those discussion sessions over Collaborate will be really valuable, is you can bring your questions to me, to the rest of the class, and we can talk about them. So that's really critical that you take advantage of those sessions. Okay, let's keep going. So now into the content, what I really wanted to talk about. Before I get into the idea of what anthropology is, many of you have probably experienced in welcome videos to your courses a land acknowledgement. Many professors begin right off the bat by speaking the land acknowledgement in the language that's been written around it. My approach is a little bit different, which is that I think it's really important that we do land acknowledgements, and I'm not critical of how my colleagues choose to do it, but I want to do it now to kind of introduce the overall broad topic of this course, which is anthropology and anthropological approaches. And land acknowledgement is a really critical part of the anthropological approach for a number of different reasons. And I'll talk about that in a second, but first let's acknowledge the land that we are on. So we are on Treaty 6 territory. Some of you may not be, some of you may be on other treaty lands, or even unceded territories as well that are found here in Canada, or you may be abroad as well. I'm interested to find out where all of you are tuning in from for this course. But where I'm located in Edmonton, where MacEwan is located, it's Treaty 6 territory, the traditional land use territory, the home of many Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, the Blackfoot, and the Métis, among others. I am a non-Indigenous person. I'm a white settler. I'm Edmonton born and raised, however, and it's only really the last few years that I started to really as part of the broader process of reconciliation, really think about what it means for me to be a treaty person as a non-Indigenous treaty person. And part of that is acknowledging that I am on treaty land, that my ancestors came here as part of the larger process of colonialism. And we'll talk a lot about colonialism in this course because it's one of the larger structures that's influenced quite significantly how people shape or how people understand gender and aging. Oh, I don't have a note here about reconciliation, but we'll get to that further on about the importance of reconciliation and land acknowledgements as part of that. Okay, so what is this thing called anthropology? Well, in my humble opinion, anthropology is the finest discipline that's ever been created. Why? Because anthropology is simply the study of humans. It is the most broad in scope, most comprehensive discipline there is. Anthropologists study everything, including other anthropologists. If there's something you're interested in, you're passionate about, you can study it as an anthropologist. And so even if you don't want to be an anthropologist when you grow up, even if you're not an anthropology major or minor, if you're just taking this because you heard that my 110 course is super fun and exciting, that is correct. But I'm hoping that some of the perspectives, some of the learning that you take away from this course will be really beneficial in all your career paths. And I have students who've gone on to be doctors and like medical doctors and nurses and lawyers and working with nonprofits and non-government organizations. And they've taken this perspective and the lessons they've learned in anthropology and been able to apply them into their workplace and feel it really enhanced their ability to do their jobs and their work. So anthropology takes what is called a 4-field approach or a 5-field approach. And I'm going to just briefly introduce each of those to you and just note that for this course, we will be taking a 4-field approach to the study of gender and aging. So my background, if you watch my video, is in archaeology, the study of the past material culture. Below, I've provided a number of listings of the different courses in archaeology we have here at MacEwan. I also just want to emphasize that while archaeology is taught as part of anthropology at MacEwan, this isn't always the case in other parts of the world. It's not just old stuff. As well, I study video games, for example, which is very recent material culture, the material culture of the last 40 years. So there's a lot of different ways we can approach this, and we'll actually talk about how gender has been interpreted in the archaeological record and using archaeological data in a couple of weeks from now. So we'll come back to this topic. Biological anthropology. This is what many of you may have been exposed to in popular culture thanks to shows like Bones. When we think about forensic anthropology, this is the study of human biological variation. Osteology is the study of our skeletal system, primates, and our human ancestors. So it's not just fossils, it's not just humans, it's living people today, it's people in the past, it's our ancestors, both narrowly in terms of looking at lineages, but also very broadly in terms of looking at what it means to be human as just one kind of primate that lives on this earth. And we'll do a little bit of bioanth starting next week. Our third subfield is linguistic anthropology, the study of language, and it's not just the study of language, which is linguistics, but in relation to the broader historical and biological context. One of the fundamental arguments is that language is unique to humans, and we'll spend a whole week looking at language and gender. Last but not least, we have cultural anthropology, and really this is the study of culture. I like to think of it, because the term culture can be really problematic, is more broadly the study of human diversity, right? All the things that we do, we make, we create, we think, we believe that make us human. But it's also how we obtain knowledge about how to behave as members of the society from the societies in which we are raised. So we're going to be spending the majority of the course kind of from an a cultural anthropological perspective. But like I said, we'll bring in the different subfields as we go. I said last but not least, our fourth subfield was cultural anthropology, but if you recall back a couple of slides in that figure, all 4 of those subfields are connected by something called applied anthropology. We'll talk about this towards the end of the term, which is literally the application of anthropological knowledge, information, and data sets to propose solution to real world problems. So it's what are the practical applications of anthropology in the real world? Okay. The last thing we need to talk about this week is what is the anthropological perspective. The simplest answer is this is what makes all anthropologists, regardless of the kind of anthropology we do. So even though I'm an archaeologist, I apply the anthropological perspective to my work. And I'm going to go over these fairly quickly this week, but know that we're going to be revisiting the anthropological perspective and the terminology I'm introducing to you in this week one content. We're going to be looking at using it just constantly. It's going to come up throughout the term. So you're going to get very comfortable using it, explaining it, describing it, discussing it, and applying it. So as I state here, it's what links the four subfields and distinguishes anthropologists from other people who study very similar topics. Gender and aging, for example, are two topics that are found in every sociology department across the world, pretty much, including our own, right? We have a gender studies minor, for example, here at MacEwan that includes courses from across Faculty of Arts and Sciences disciplines. So it's the anthropological perspective that makes us unique, and it's comprised of four major parts: cultural relativism, participant observation, holism, and cross-culture comparison or ethnology. So let's look at each of these in turn. I like this definition by Greenwood and Stinney on cultural relativism, which states that it is the ability to, or the attempt to, understand another culture in its own terms. Right? So it says first and foremost, and we are going to in this class look at information, experiences from people in other cultures, as we want to just understand that other culture in its own terms. So what is the words that they use to describe gender? How did they talk about gender? What is the significance of gender in their culture? But we want to do so, and this is what the rest of the definition says, sympathetically enough so that the culture appears to be a coherent and meaningful design for living. So essentially what we're doing with cultural relativism is trying to understand other cultures, but understanding it in a way that allows us to understand that how that culture views the world, how they construct gender, is meaningful and valid and logical and coherent to them, right? So one of the challenges we have as an anthropologist is the acknowledgement that often we're studying a group as an outsider, right? So we have to try to understand, what do insiders within that culture, how do they approach these topics, right? And the reason why we try to apply cultural relativism is first that we're trying to understand all the ideas, meanings, and beliefs and values that people have in a society, but we're trying to argue against reductionist or deterministic interpretations of the world. Deterministic value or understandings of the world kind of are almost like a cybernetic view of how humans occupy their idea that humans are kind of taught ways of behaving by their culture, and that's the only way that we can behave, that we can't operate in different kinds of ways, that we can't challenge existing paradigms. And we know that's false, right? Like, look at the global political context that's going on right now, right? People are saying, hey, we know this is the way our society, for example, treats Black people, right? But this is not okay. This is a source of inequity. It's a source of injustice. And so Black Lives Matter movement is a huge phenomenon right now, right? There's protests and ongoing rioting right now that reflect that people are not okay with what's going on in their cultures, right? In their states and their societies. So as anthropologists, we want to avoid those kind of deterministic arguments where we state that, well, everyone in their culture goes along with all of the ideas of their culture and they accept it and they're not open to other worldviews, because we know that's not the case. Also, we want to, by applying cultural relativism, where we view a society's own customs and ideas within the context of their problems and opportunities, is to avoid ethnocentrism. And ethnocentrism is where we judge other societies' customs and ideas and beliefs in the context of our own culture, right? And so a classic example that's used for this is around food preferences and eating, right? And so I have friends who are South American, and in certain parts of South America, guinea pigs are food, not pets, right? So here we don't eat guinea pig, but there they do, right? So an ethnocentric interpretation of the consumption of guinea pigs as a food resource would be that that's gross and wrong because guinea pigs are pets, they're not food. A cultural relativistic interpretation of that would be, well, people there eat guinea pigs because, right? And if I want to find out why they do, why it makes sense, why guinea pigs are food and not pets, I need to ask them, right? Find out from them what is going on. And this allows us to improve our understanding then of practices that are much more controversial than simply the food people eat. And trust me, food is really controversial, but there's way other ones we're going to get into this course, such as female genital modification or circumcision, that is much more controversial. So in discussion this week, I'd like to talk about this question I have here at the bottom, which is it possible to avoid an ethnocentric bias? So how then can we make interpretations? Can we do analyses? Can we study other cultures and apply cultural determinism? Or sorry, not cultural determinism, cultural relativism? Well, we have participant observation. Anthropologists do fieldwork, and we're going to spend a whole week looking at fieldwork, how we gain insights into other cultures by participating with informants in social activities, particularly the social activities we want to learn more about. We still acknowledge that more often than not, we're observing these activities as outsiders, but we treat the people who participate in our research as that. They're not research subjects, but rather they're people from which we're deriving important information, and so we kind of honor their expertise and their knowledge and their position by referring to them as respondents or teachers or friends or colleagues. Next in the anthropological perspective is holism. This is often simply defined as that anthropologists prefer to examine the whole as the sum of the parts, right? So this is the idea that while as anthropologists we study small parts of culture, we understand that they are just little cogs within the larger machine, right? So even though, let's say if I was studying cars, I might become an expert on all things tires of cars. If I really want to understand why tires are important to cars, I need to look at the rest of the car. So that's what holism's getting at. A bit deeper, if we dive into holism, it also talks about the interrelationships that exist between humans, that humans are not only interacting with humans, we interact with our environment, both the physical environment, but also the plant environment, the animals around us, and that our interactions with our objects, with our environments, also influence our understanding of ourselves and the world around us, right? So this means that we're open system. We're not closed box, that we're subject to change, right? And part of this is because we've realized that cultural deterministic perspectives don't work either, right? That again, people challenge existing paradigms, people challenge existing institutions. Finally, and this is what we're going to be doing lots of in this course, is cross-cultural comparisons or ethnology. And this is where we're going to look at the similarities and difference in a wide range of human societies before we attempt to make any generalizations around what it means to be human, right? If I want to understand how gender works, I can't just look at our own society and then look at one other culture and be like, okay, this is how humans view gender. It doesn't work that way. And indeed, one of the things that anthropologists have found through ethnology is that there are very few things that all humans share from a cultural perspective. There's lots of variation, but there are broad themes. And that's some of the things we're going to attempt to capture in this course is relating to gender and aging. What are some of the broader understandings that all humans seem to share? And then how do they vary when they are similar but not the same? Lastly, what we need to do, and this doesn't relate to an anthropological perspective, but this relates more to my take on this course, is we need to think about how we can decolonize anthropology. Anthropology is a colonial discipline, and that has a number of consequences in terms of how the anthropological perspective is constructed, how we study cultures, what cultures we study. You might have noticed I mentioned that more often than not, we're outsiders of the groups we study. That's really radically been changing. Increasingly, we're studying ourselves, our own cultures, our own groups that we belong to. This is a way of decolonizing anthropology. We don't exoticize the other. It's also important because what we're going to be doing in this class is kind of critically examining how we have learned and what we do know about gender and aging, and then kind of breaking that down and then rebuilding it into a new understanding of gender and aging as well. So this is part of that decolonization process. And we'll talk more about this as the term goes, but I thought it was important to talk about it right off the bat. Okay, so that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. Again, I'll just go back and emphasize that I want you to spend some time with your syllabus, do that syllabus quiz. Use me as your most valuable resource for this course, right? Contact me with questions, come to Blackboard Collaborate sessions, and engage with discussion with your classmates. And then now start to familiarize yourself with what it means to take an anthropological perspective and get used to the idea that we're going to be talking about holism, cultural relativism, and then using ethnology and participant observation to understand gender and aging from a cross-cultural perspective. Okay. So have a good week, everyone, and I will see you at Blackboard Collaborate.